2,000 meters. So that's kind of how I pay my bills. I'm also involved in another project called Blue Abyss here in the UK, which is going to be the world's first commercial astronaut training facility and the largest pool by volume in the world, and really spearheading and pushing the boundaries in deep ocean and space, human space flight and research. So that's another cool, exciting thing going on. I've been very, very lucky in my adventures that I've dived all over the world, really, all oceans and all continents, and in a various different ways, either taking people diving, either going diving myself on my own expeditions, taking groups of scientists or filmmakers, that kind of thing. So there's still a few places, still a few dots to fill in on the map. But one thing I've learned over the 20 odd years that I've been doing this is always about being prepared, and there's different ways that you can be prepared for any sort of adventure. Whether it's me nipping down the coast here to go and dive off a St. Abbs Head or some local dive site, or whether it's me shipping all my gear to the Antarctic to go and dive there. And what I've generally found is with taking other people or organizing other people or organizing events and expeditions and so on, is there are different levels of preparedness, and some people are completely over prepared and some people are completely under prepared, and it's getting that fine level in between of having your skills and training up to date, knowing the situation that you're going to get into, knowing your equipment, making sure you've got levels of redundancy, all sorts of things. So I just want to go over a few sort of high level things regarding this. Now, I'm known primarily for diving in cold water or very cold water. I have to give a little chuckle. I remember diving with Roland Mouse off of Protea a few years back, and he came out of the water saying it was the coldest dive he'd ever been on over there, and it was 13 degrees, which was like a balmy day in Scotland. So I think I've always been destined to be diving in extremely cold water. And in the polar regions, in the Antarctic and the different regions of the Arctic, the temperature is usually pretty thermally stable, around about +2 to -2 Celsius. And that is a really, really marked difference to diving in what a lot of other people might consider cold water, even down to sort of like 5 or 6 degrees water temperature. When you start getting much lower than that, it really is an extremely demanding environment for the body. And to give you an example, over the course of a dive, you will burn an extraordinary amount of energy just simply keeping your body at its normal functioning state. So even without everything else bolted on top, your body is already working hard to deal with this sort of situation. And as a warm-blooded mammal, getting into 0-degree water, it's quite a shock for us. So there are a lot of things that you have to consider when you start putting yourself into that sort of situation. A couple of years ago, I took a film team from Australia 60 Minutes down to the Antarctic, where they wanted to go and film leopard seals, and this photograph pretty much encapsulates the situation we were in, where Ali, the presenter, sitting there, had done her dry suit course in preparation and so on, in Sydney Harbour in about 20 degrees of water, and then she turned up in the Antarctic with myself, and towards the end of season in March, and we cracked on for a couple of weeks filming leopard seals and diving with them. And you can pretty much see the look in her face that it was just about the coldest, possibly one of the most horrible experiences she's ever had in her life. So I've got a wee video clip from that documentary to show you, and you'll notice certain little things like how her lips are gripping the regulator, and that she's so cold she can't really feel how her face is functioning. And then you may also notice that at the end she's wearing not one pair of lobster mitts but two pairs of lobster mitts. So this was someone who was really taken out of their comfort zone and diving in this bizarre situation. So hopefully you'll get the audio on this as we go. Is that no audio? No audio. Hang on then. We had this before. Just bear with us a moment, folks. Karen, you'll maybe give me a thumbs up, yeah?
We certainly picked a very Antarctic day for it.
I like that we're navigating icebergs and ice blocks on our way out to the dive site.
There's no confusing where we are.
Why did we decide to do this again?
Because they're wonderful animals and we're slightly touched. On three. 1, 2, 3.
Diving in Antarctica is unlike anything I have experienced before. The water hits your face like 1,000 darts. It's not a matter of keeping warm, it's a question of how long before you start freezing.
The gas you're breathing is cold, your fingers are cold, your face is cold, I mean everything, and it's just sucking energy and ability out of you.
It begs the question, why do we do it?
I think it's in our very nature to go off and explore, you know, to see wild and inhospitable places. That's why we try and get to the bottom of the ocean, that's why we try and get into outer space.
It's proven to be a very long and frustrating day. We saw a leopard seal this morning eating a penguin, and we've been chasing it basically, but they're so elusive and it's so easy to lose them amongst all the ice. So we spent the whole day out on the water. It is beyond cold, so beyond cold, but then tomorrow's always a new day, and fingers crossed that we find it again, we get one.
So yeah, both Ali and the cameraman were absolutely freezing on that. And although they'd gone through a certain amount of preparedness, they just weren't really ready for those sorts of conditions. So my general top tip and takeaway from that is stay cool and stay warm. Do your homework, do your research. Make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Get your training and skills up to date. And be ready. So do your homework. And now during lockdown is a perfect time to be doing your homework. And one thing that I'm sure you'll all agree with being underwater is it's kind of nice to keep on breathing and to have a good supply of gas. Don't worry, I'm not about to leap into any kind of lecture here or anything like that. And anybody who doesn't know these sort of processes with a regulator probably doesn't need to be sitting here. But you have to understand what's going on with your equipment, and there are some marked differences when you're diving in extremely cold water. And I'm very keen on this law, particularly because it's known as the Kelvin effect, not named after myself. Whereas as gases expand, they also have a very dramatic cooling effect. So when you're pushing a load of gas through a regulator, whether it's for breathing, or whether you're inflating your dry suit, or you're inflating a BCD, or you're operating any other equipment, the more demand, the more effort, the more gas that you're shoving through that regulator ends up making the regulator extremely cold. And if there's any kind of moisture within there, then eventually this thing is going to blow up in your face, and you're going to find your precious gas supply venting quite dramatically. So I'm sure you're all very familiar with this kind of scenario, but of course, if you are in a weird and wonderful part of the world, you're in a very cold water, you've maybe got a ceiling above you, or whether it's a decompression ceiling, or whether it's an ice ceiling, a physical ceiling, then you're going to start to have a very bad day. And we have to remember, of course, that our lungs are just this fragile little bag that don't really enjoy being overpressurized. So, diving in extreme environments and diving in a very, very cold environment, and having a good understanding of how the kit is going to respond to that, what the breathing gas is going to do, and all the physics associated with that is another thing. So don't take it for granted that what you were doing at home with that equipment is going to be the same as what you're doing with it, and how it's going to behave when you're in another part of the world. Now, another really important factor to expedition diving is the people involved. And I've got a couple of images here from my time with the British Antarctic Survey. I'm dressed in a sort of a weird get-up there because I've just been chainsawing a hole through the ice there. I'm stood on the frozen sea, and that triangular hole at my feet is what we're going to dive through. And I can remember very clearly when that photograph was taken. I was looking out, and I had this list going through my head of everything that was going on, thinking about my relatively young and inexperienced team that I was going to commit to diving under the ice. This was also a place that had a history of a fatal attack by a leopard seal, and there was a lot of concern about being in the water with these animals. Of course, the water is extremely cold. We're many, many, many miles. This is the middle of the Antarctic winter, so there's just no help coming. We would have to look after ourselves. And so all these thoughts and all this responsibility is sitting on my shoulders and going through my head as the diving superintendent for that project. And then you also have to consider, not just the person who's running the expedition, but the team involved and all the persons, and they're all an essential cog in the machine. And it's thinking about what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what are their capabilities, how do they need to be encouraged, supported, and so on. And all my team on this project had not dived under ice before, so I trained them all up in those sort of procedures, and I chaperoned them through all of their initial dives. And we really worked together to become fully supportive of each other in all the different roles that we had to undertake. And all of us were supervising, all of us were tenders, all of us were working divers, all of us were standby divers, all of us were chamber operators, and so on. And it was growing that responsibility within the team, and the understanding and how we can best look after each other. And then there's the diver themselves, and it doesn't matter if we are part of a team and that we maybe have somebody who's in charge of us, a supervisor, a superintendent, an expedition leader, whatever. Each diver has their own individual responsibility to, look after their health and fitness, to dive accordingly, to dive within their limits, to be a responsible diver. And not just jeopardize themselves, but jeopardize other people in the team, especially in these places where you just can't call for a helicopter, you can't call for additional medical support. And one thing that has occurred to me over the years is that experience is very much a matter of perspective. And I've had people turn up in the Antarctic. I've had groups of everyone being a dive professional, people turning up saying, I've got 10,000 dives, you can't teach me a thing. And they have all ended up in trouble and me having to sort them out off the boat. And I think anytime you're getting underwater or you're getting yourself into one of these sort of bigger expeditions or going to a place you don't know or something like that, you have to have a certain amount of humility and be prepared to listen to each other and gain and enjoy the experience of others and what you can learn from them. And this is one of my old teams from a trip a few years back, and this was at the end of the trip. And despite the smiles on our faces, it was an awful trip, and where we had started it off with the tragic loss of one of the dive team in an extraordinary accident. And I spent the rest of the trip essentially working with the authorities, working with the family, and so on, getting everything organised, dealing with this poor corpse that we had on board the ship. And my team absolutely stepped up, knowing that I had that to deal with. I couldn't tell you what happened for the rest of the trip. Those guys just all independently went off and just did it. And they, of course, going through such a traumatic event, everybody backed each other up. Everybody looked after each other. Even now, to this day, sort of 6 years later, we all still check in with each other and talk about those times and so on. So, if there's one takeaway from all of that, is my top tip would be foster a good team. Having good people around you is absolutely invaluable, and they have to be supported. They have to be nourished, encouraged, and that way they'll always be able to help you out and look after you and each other. And another thing with polar diving or technical diving or diving that's beyond what we might consider normal is just the sheer physicality of it. And this is me climbing out through the ice and the porridge ice there. So we've got broken sea ice around me and porridge ice. I'm wearing, a lot of equipment and a redundant breathing system as well. And I'm climbing up a rocky surface. I mean, it was hard work. It doesn't matter if you're diving from shore or getting, into the side of a boat. This is one of my clients from a trip a few years back. He's very, very happy to be getting his photograph taken in the ice there. But we still had to, pretty much haul him out of the water and physically lift him. I don't know if he'd been so happy if he'd noticed this thing that was immediately behind him, but we'll talk more about them in just a moment. It's a very, very physical process. And just throwing a few quick numbers together, if you think about the amount of equipment that you're carrying out on the deck of the boat or climbing up shore, that kind of thing, it's a great physical demand upon you. Now, obviously, we can keep ourselves fit, and even if it's during lockdown or something like that, I've been exercising up and down the stairs and working out in my kitchen and all that kind of thing. Being ready for when adventures kick off again. We also have other things to consider. I mean, God, there's enough to worry about on any dive. All the things that could get thrown in our direction that we have to be aware of and we have to guard against. So, this is an inherently hazardous sport, so we have to be we can't take that for granted, no matter how long we've been diving or what we've been doing. This is a photograph of me at my most recent dive medical, the kind of practitioners we have in the UK. But you can go through, obviously, medical assessment processes and self-assessment and getting medical doctors to look at you and so on. But one thing I have picked up on is if any of you ever watched that series with Hugh Laurie, House, he's quoted as saying, everybody lies. Everybody lies about their medical conditions or their fitness or something like that at some point. And I've sat in a boat ready to commit a diver to polar waters, and he's been looking really, really wound up. And he turned around and confessed and said, maybe Antarctica isn't the place for me to get over my near drowning incident. So, not being aware of that until the moment that we were all sitting kitted up in the boat is not necessarily the best time to learn. So my top tip is making sure that everybody's fit for purpose and everybody's ready for whatever you're about to go and put yourself through. And of course, you know, part of the reason we go to these places is to see these incredible sights or to have these amazing experiences. And whether it's diving along a huge iceberg, whether it's diving under ice and seeing that sort of shaft of light coming down through that ceiling, or whether it's diving with amazing animals, or going through a cave, or achieving a depth limit, seeing a wreck, whatever. There's a lot going on that we're very excited about and that we're very interested in. But when I take the example of ice can be a very stable platform to work on, and it is amazing to dive under, whether it's sea ice or whether it's alongside the big chunks of glacial ice and so on. But it's a very, very dynamic and potentially aggressive force. And you know, no matter the beauty or the majesty of what you're seeing around you, or the incredible wildlife experience that you're having and so on, you have to maintain an awareness of what's going on around you.
Not very nice.
That's not going to last for today. Why don't we just stay here and watch it? Nothing cool. Whoa. It's falling. Rome is falling.
Yeah, not one of my trips. But you know, the world around us can be unpredictable, and things can happen. I love that line there. Do you think we should just stay and watch it? You know, watching this collapsing iceberg. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's an iceberg, if it's inside a cave, it's inside a wreck, if it's diving with the big animals or whatever. Always maintain an awareness of what's going around you. Don't get carried away by the moment. Don't get carried away by the excitement. Don't respond to peer pressure. You know, I know this might be the trip of a lifetime, but you've got to keep your wits around you.
So, brave knights, if you do doubt your courage or your strength, come no further, for death awaits you all with nasty big pointy teeth.
What an eccentric performance.
That's been my inspiration for most of my dive briefings. Yeah, one of the big things that a lot of people are interested in are animals with big, nasty big pointy teeth. One of the real superstars of Antarctic diving is the leopard seal. And this is a shot by Joran Elm of Waterproof, and it just goes to show you just how up close and personal that leopard seals can be with you. And they are extremely bold characters. They have no fear of it coming right up into your windscreen. And I've got a little video clip of one in just a moment, but you'll see that this clip is just a wee animal. It's only maybe 6 or 7 feet long, but bear in mind that they get up to 13 or 14 feet and about 500 kilos. So it's essentially the same size as a polar bear, but swimming like a fur seal all around you. So anyway, I don't know if you noticed that seal there had bits of penguin still hanging off its teeth. So they're very, very interesting animals to dive with. They have real personalities. The young ones are much like, you know, young ones of our own, can be very, very curious and inquisitive and playful, but can also keep their distance. But big ones like this female that's behind me here, this is about the biggest leopard seal I've ever dived with. She was about 13 feet long and full breathing weight, and sneaked up behind us. And truthfully, the display that they give is there to intimidate you, and it works. Yeah, it can be quite a powerful experience. And I'm sure many of you with diving, especially in South Africa, have had incredible wildlife experiences there. And it is a very powerful experience to be in the water with something that is that confident and that sure of itself. Difference, of course, being with sharks, as many sharks maintain they'll stay maybe 5 or 10 meters away from you unless they've got very serious intent. A leopard seal, again, this thing the size of a bear, will have no qualms about coming right up in your face straight away, even though it's maybe never seen a diver before. So, that can provoke different reactions in people, is my point. And so you have to be ready for that kind of thing. And then if we go at the other end of the world, up to the Arctic and various regions of the Arctic, you're not so concerned about beasts that are in the water, but you do have to be aware of these other beasts that are going around. And the polar bear is a marine mammal. They are very, very capable in the water. This bear here, we followed it we observed it from a distance for about 2 hours as it combed back and forth through the ice, and then it eventually caught up the scent of this bearded seal on the floe here, and it made a beeline for it. About 50 meters out from the floe, it dived and vanished, and everyone's saying, "Where's the bear going? Where's the bear going?" I said, "Never mind the bear, watch the seal." And then with that, the bear just popped up out of the water. And at one point, it was only a head length away from the seal, and very nearly nailed it. Again, this is a warm-blooded mammal that is taken to essentially living on ice and hunting by the sea. So they're very, very capable hunters, and you do have to be aware of them when you're in a boat, when you're out at sea, when you're walking along the shore, when you're hiking inland. I've seen them climb cliffs, all sorts. So, you do have to be aware of how these beasts are going to react. And they are very, very capable of dispatching things that are their own weight. This female bear here got this beardie out the water, and that beardie will weigh almost the same size as, almost weigh the same as her. Eventually this kill was nicked by another bigger bear that came along. So they're very, very exciting animals to see, but it is the kind of thing that you want to keep at a fairly close, a fair distance rather. But then, another thing to add to your dive gear list is going around with a high-powered rifle, and it's not every day that you go for a hike in a dry suit with a 30-06 rifle over your shoulder with hunting ammunition. But no matter all the excitement and the drama and sometimes the fear, if you like, or the caution of working around these big animals, whether it's polar bear, whether it's leopard seal, whether it's walrus, things like that, whether it's having firearms involved, things like that, you have to remember that common things happen commonly. And so the incidents that you're going to be dealing with are going to be, people slipping on a deck, people slipping on ice, people tripping over a weight belt, people, injuring their back, lifting their set, dropping a scuba tank on their cylinder, that kind of thing. So as much as you do have to be prepared for these big, big things that are going on with leopard seals and polar bears and walrus and so on, you have to remember that probably the biggest liability that you're working with are going to be people. And it's common things are going to happen, and it's those little things, and those, even a twisted ankle or a popped eardrum or something like that is not necessarily a life-threatening thing, but it could call you into your expedition and your trip. So don't get wowed by the big teeth, but remember that people are probably going to be your biggest problem. And just to sum up, this guy here is Roald Amundsen, who's probably one of the most accomplished explorers. He, of course, as we know, was the first to the South Pole. He flew over the North Pole. He was the first to sail through the Northwest Passage, and countless other major achievements. But he was a great logistician, and he coined the phrase that adventure is just bad planning. So with that, I would like to wish you many, many adventures, but hopefully with lots of very good planning involved. And with that, I will thank you very much for listening.
Kelvin, thank you very much. That was incredible. I'm going to pop off with some questions. Whoa, what's changed here? Hold on, my screen's just reset itself. A question from Pietri. What would your average dive time be in these cold temperatures with or without deco?
Well, we're typically diving, no decompression diving, because we don't have the facilities to, deal with any incident. So it's very conservative diving, and it really does come down to the individual. Now, during my time with the British Antarctic Survey, I clocked up 82 minutes in -2, and that was wearing wet gloves, three finger mitts. And that's cold. And I've come up from dives in Svalbard where I've realized that I was in a bit of trouble because I'd started to shake and I'd started to get, feel very shivery, and then I'd stopped getting very shivery, and I couldn't really get myself into the boat that well because my muscles had all kind of stopped to function so much, and then I couldn't speak properly. So I would say at that point I was mildly hypothermic, and I'd probably pushed it a bit. And that was after about 60 minutes. So it will depend on your exposure gear and the equipment that you have, and also just how you're used to it. And when I'm diving, I tend to eat. Diving in these sort of places, I see my food as fuel. So it's a great excuse for a nice big fatty breakfast, like lots of bacon, lots of butter, all that kind of thing, because I'm going to burn that, as we saw earlier on, 1,000 calories just being in the water. So I've seen guests and clients get between 15 and 30 minutes. 30 minutes is probably your average. An experienced dry suit and cold water diver could be getting an hour and a half perhaps, depending on the circumstances. But that's probably just 20 meters max, a single cylinder, and nice conservative diving.
Wow. All right. Lots of people saying thank you very much. Tanya Stewart from Hein. Have you had any close calls with big animals?
Yeah, I mean, that leopard seal that in that photograph there, that was a pretty spooky experience, because we were just coming up from the dive and I stopped at about 5 meters, and I saw this thing coming along the shoreline. And at first I thought it was a smaller seal, a kind called a crab eater. And then as it obviously got closer, I saw it was this enormous bloody leopard seal. And just after that photograph was taken, the seal came, I was looking down the other way, and the seal came up behind me, away from where I was looking, and then just hung there over the top of me. And the head is about the size of a waste paper basket. And they can, when they gape, jaws will gape about 50 centimeters. So your head will fit in there very neatly. And they are extremely bold. They've got no qualms about trying to say to you, this is my hunting patch. What on earth are you doing here? Words to that effect. And the seal was deliberately trying to intimidate us and say, because they're normally territorial hunters and they don't like other animals being there. And the problem wasn't so much for myself, because I just thought, right, I'm just going to sit here like a scolded schoolboy and wait for it to go away. I was more concerned about how the other divers were going to react. And there was another pair of divers, one of them completely freaked and started finning backwards and finning to the surface and trying to climb that invisible ladder up out of the water. And dropped his weight belt, dropped his fin, the whole kind of thing. And I looked at my buddy, who I'd said just sit there and stay still. And when the seal swam off, I just looked over at Chris, and his eyes were just like saucers, and he sort of very timidly just kind of went thumbs up, and I was like, yeah, let's put our thumbs up, and we got out of the water fairly sharpish with this seal sort of like leaping all around us at close quarters, still giving us this sort of intimidation display. But by the time that we were in the boat going back to the ship, the mood had completely changed, and we were like, that was completely awesome, what a huge seal, and blah 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 blah, you know. So but you know, had divers panicked, bolted to the surface, saw that kind of thing, then it could have ended up being a very different day. And bears, I've had a couple of encounters with bears where I have put a chamber into the round, a round into the chamber, sorry, and they thought, am I going to have to fend off a bear here? But no, it didn't come to it that day. But I think bears are scarier because they're actively trying to hunt you and eat you.
Thank you. All right, Mark, we're not going to go through yours. Maria, thank you. Kelvin, that was awesome. Yaku, what were your top 3 dives?
Ooh, top 3 dives. I have to say that one with that leopard seal was pretty cool because I'd also found an Antarctic octopus on that dive for the clients, and yeah, it was just an amazing dive in an unusual location. So that was pretty cool. Diving, yeah, I've had some, actually, no joke, I've had some really cool dives in South Africa with sharks, and having some really for want of a better word, intimate encounters with sharks, where you're diving with them or you're diving alongside them, and they're checking you out as much as you're checking them out, and it's a completely passive and respectful environment, and it's 2 different species just sort of curious about each other. So I've really enjoyed that. And another would be oh god, there's so many stand out. Yeah, difficult to say, really. Difficult to say.
Okay, cool, thank you.
I'll have a think. I'll think of something else pops up.
Okay, Pietri as well, fantastic, thank you. Greg, thank you. Alex, would you ever use a hot water suit?
For that, you would need to be surface supplied, really. And I mean, to be honest, the gear that you have these days is sufficient for the conservative diving that we're doing. A hot water suit, you know, obviously, if you would have to think, well, why would you need that? You'd have to be doing a prolonged job underwater. So I could understand for something like civil engineering or whatever. But I mean, these days I dive in a 4th element Argonaut and the corresponding layers under there. In January, I was diving in the Antarctic, and I got to test out their new the name's just escaped me. The new aerogel gear, which is phenomenal. It's incredibly lightweight and has a very good thermal protection. So yeah, so I've found that I don't really need that because the gear is so good these days. It's usually my thumbs that go, because I still dive with wet gloves, and but I pour warm water into my gloves just to slow down how long it takes my thumbs to get too cold.
From Nikki, where would you find more information on the Blue Abyss?
The Blue Abyss website, blueabyss.uk. And that's that's an ongoing project. They're trying to find the right site here in the UK for that, but that's going to be phenomenal.
Cool. Cameron, thanks for an amazing presentation. Michael Jacobs, that was awesome. I really enjoyed it, even though it's not my cup of tea to dive in the ice. Thank you so much. Keep safe. We're still a special breed that makes the most out of life. Jerome, thank you. Amazing. Hein, thank you. Where would you like to do an expedition that is not planned yet?
I've always wanted to dive a lot off the west coast of Vancouver Island, because you've got cold water, good visibility, big animals. It ticks a lot of boxes for me. I'd also like to do the Russian White Sea, and the Russian White Sea. Yeah, again, same kind of thing. They get. I mean, we had it cold in the Antarctic, but I think the coldest I've ever had has been up in Nunavut. So the Arctic actually gets a lot colder. So the Russian White Sea, and I'd love to dive in the Northwest Passage. But these are all areas that we operate in with our private expeditions. So hopefully I can get the right client to get a diving trip going there.
While we're on that question, how would the guys get involved? We've had a couple of inquiries about that.
Yeah, well, we are looking at expanding our product to have more high-end remote liveaboard experiences, so to speak. But it would probably be a sort of a higher-end product than liveaboards that you're seeing, say in the Red Sea or whatever else. But they're going to very, very exclusive destinations, but including like the Antarctic and so on. But then also really cool places like Cocos Island and still out of the way, still exclusive and difficult to get to, but amazing diving. So we're very keen on having a suitable product that's exclusive enough for a certain clientele. So there is that out there. But if people are talking about getting involved, as in working in this sort of field, the expedition cruise industry does have some diving opportunities within it, but it's there's not an extraordinary amount of diving going on. But there are commercial operators that are working a lot down in the Antarctic and that are also working in the Arctic to some degree. And they are a good way into getting into expedition diving.
All right. So if somebody just wanted to do a trip, who would they contact? Who would they get that information from? We.
Yeah. Get in touch with me. Get in touch with EOS. We, as time goes by, we will be putting out more information on the kind of trips that we will be running and the locations and so on. So I think over the next sort of weeks and months, you'll be seeing some of our marketing change to show people what the options are. But this is all sort of under development at the moment. We've been concentrating on private individuals at the moment, but now we're looking at other opportunities for groups.
Nice. Okay, from PJ, what projects do you have coming up?
Well, for me personally, I'm working on a trip in East Greenland at the moment, which I'm just project managing, but that's so I won't be there. But that's a yacht sailing up East Greenland and getting as far north as possible and exploring all the different fjords and so on there. I'm working on another one concerning a wreck, but I can't talk too much about that at the moment. But if you keep an eye on EOS, then we'll be announcing that if and when we can. But that'll be extremely cool. I can't mention the wreck because you'll all know it. And then there's a Ring of Fire. So in a couple of weeks' time, I hope to go over to Guam in the Western Pacific, join Pressure Drop again. And we're going to go and dive those 4 deep pools in the Mariana Trench, which are not quite as deep as Challenger, but they're still 10,000 meters plus. And they've never been dived, never been seen by human eyes. We're going to get a lot of cameras down there and do a bunch of science. And fingers crossed, this coronavirus won't get in the way of all that. But you might have seen in the news we've just successfully got Dr. Kathy Sullivan to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, becoming the first woman to do it, and she's also the first woman to be in space and to the bottom of the ocean. So it's cool stuff.
Very exciting stuff. Thank you. Carl, what backup do you have for a frozen rig?
Either a completely independent supply. So sometimes it's a pony bottle. So the way I tend to dive is I have a large capacity, low pressure cylinder, So something like a 15 that's maybe only filled to like 150, 180 bar. So there's a lower pressure differential between the cylinder and the reg, or diving on a twin that will allow me to isolate one side, or it's having a fully independent system. And so with Bass, we had 15-litre cylinders with a 3-litre pony, and that pony was completely independent. And we had the AGA diverter mask, and the supply from the pony went straight into a needle valve on the side of the mask. So you basically just had a continual flow, creating a positive pressure inside the mask, inside that, for just so you could abort your dive. So it's usually that kind of backup.
Yeah. Okay, we've got the last 2 questions here. Do you do a lot of diving in Scotland, and if so, where? This is from Sonia Welsh.
It's funny. I used to do loads and loads of diving in Scotland. I'd be out almost every single day, and with lockdown, this is the most time I've spent at home in years. And then immediately prior to that, my children were very young, and if any of you have got a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, you know that working all week and then skipping away at the weekend is not necessarily going to work. So I used to do loads of diving. The west coast of Scotland is fantastic for diving. You can dive there 365 days of the year. Amazing wrecks, covered in life. You've also got the Gulf Stream coming up, so you have a mixture of warm and cold water, so it's very nutrient rich. You also get charismatic megafauna, so we have seals, grey seals, you get minke whale, you get lots of basking shark. A wreck will be absolutely spectacular, covered in life and anemones and colours and so on. So I love diving in Scotland. I would love to do more exploratory stuff on the west coast, because I think it's a bit of an undiscovered country for a lot of people.
Thank you. And the last question, a great presentation, thanks. Do you ever get time to dive in warm water locations?
No, not so much really, because I tend to go, because I specialize in cold water, and my work tends to send me to polar places, because that's what I specialize in. So my last dive was in the Antarctic. Time before that was in Greenland. Time before that was in Iceland. Time before that was in Greenland. The last time I dived in a wetsuit, I think, was 2017, maybe, something like that. I don't know. I would love to. Don't get me wrong, but I've been kind of like, pigeonholed as, I just love diving in a dry suit. No, I would love to go somewhere warm. Please, my boss, send me somewhere warm.
Kelvin, thank you so much. That was an incredible talk. Judging by all the comments, everybody has enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A great pleasure.